Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Selling Greenville, your favorite real estate podcast here in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm your host, as always, Stan McCune, realtor right here in Greenville, and you can find all of my contact information in the show notes if you need to reach out to me for any of your real estate needs. And please, if you're watching this on YouTube, it takes 1 second to hit the like button, okay? I don't get too many likes on my channel. So I'm asking you guys, yes, I'm begging. Sounds weak. It is weak. I just want you guys to like my show, you know? That's all I ask. So please like it. Make sure you subscribe. Again, if you're on YouTube, hit the little bell. That'll subscribe you. If you're on other podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, there's a bunch of different ways to subscribe, to leave feedback. I just appreciate you guys if you could do any of those good things for me. Today, we're going to be talking about what happened in the month of July. I apologize that this is coming out late. It's just these stats that we don't get from GGAR like right away. It takes a while for the Greater Greenville Association of Realtors to get these to us, and then sometimes it just doesn't work well simply within my podcasting schedule in order to get these out. So I just got these just a few days ago. You guys are getting them as quickly as I could get them to you. And I'm going to be doing this a little bit different than normal. Rather than strictly focusing on month to month, year to year, I'm going to be looking at these from the lens of how are things tracking with regard to historical trends, right? Going all the way back to 2013. And I'll tell you why I'm choosing 2013. The market finally started to normalize in 2013 after coming out of the strange times of 2004 through 2012. 2004 through 2012, of course, we know a bubble in the real estate industry was growing from 2004 to 2008, finally burst roughly 2008 time period. Then we had the global financial crisis, and then we started to kind of come out of that. But we had something honestly similar to what happened during COVID, which is that the government getting involved and dumping stimulus into the housing market ended up causing the recovery to take longer. That's my personal opinion. These things are debated, obviously. So if you want other alternate opinions, you can find those out there. But my personal opinion is that we unnecessarily dragged out the worst of the recession of 2008 by introducing too much government stimulus, too much quantitative easing. And I think that is also what happened during COVID. Okay, I think it was too much stimulus coming from too many places, and that has caused our economy to just kind of stall out and to turn into this weird situation where some numbers are getting worse, but they're not getting worse so quickly that we could be like, well, we're going to recession, and here's what we have to do. There's like no roadmap for this. And I'm recording this, by the way, before the Fed does their little Jackson Hole symposium that they do every year. So I don't know what's going to come out of that, what the Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell is going to say. Clearly, there will be some very interesting things to come out of that. Because, again, some of our data, we're getting all this economic data in. Some of it's coming in where it's looking like, whoa, this is way better than we thought. And then some of it's coming in, whoa, this looks way worse than we thought. And nobody really knows how to interpret it. Like, it's a very confusing time. And a lot of that, in my opinion, has to do with what the government did. All that to say, what we can do is do kind of what a lot of people that analyze markets do, particularly when you have a large set of data that's been charted out and graphed out. And just it's a very simple way of analyzing trajectory. You just draw a straight line basically across the certain points of the graph every single year, and then that kind of tells you what the growth trajectory or non-growth trajectory roughly is. And I've done this for several of these graphics that I have for you guys, and this is going to be the thrust of what we talk about. So our new listings data, we're going to start right there at the top. So obviously this goes without saying, you're best served watching this on YouTube, but I'll try to make this digestible in audio form as well, since the vast majority of you guys are consuming it via audio. New listings data. New listings came in at 2554 for the month. Big print if that ends up holding up with revisions. Last month's new listings actually got revised upward. So we could even see July's new listings revised upward as well. So one thing we're not struggling with right now is that we're not having a deficit of new homes coming on the market. And if you're looking, by the way, that 2554, that's a 22% increase from the 2,082 new listings we had in July of 2024. So that's a big increase. If you look at the chart, you see where I drew the line from 2013, basically going across the peaks of many years, and where it should be right now, we're basically exactly where it should be. Okay? The new listings data we have right now is exactly in line with where it should be based on how the market was basically from 2013 through 2019. That's basically what I'm basing these lines that I'll be doing off of is 2013 and 2019. Because like I said, those are the few years where we weren't directly impacted by some kind of a recession and government response. And some people might argue COVID wasn't a recession, whatever. It's considered a recession by economists. So what is happening here? Why does it feel still like we don't have enough supply? And the reason is here, right? The gap between the line. And if you're not watching on YouTube, I'm pointing out that in 2020, 2021, 2023, and even 2024, we were below the line. And so we had a shortage of new listings data for many years, and that's created a backlog that now, even though we're kind of back to where we should be, we're still playing catch up, right? And this is what happens in markets, oftentimes in the real estate market specifically, is there will be artificial increases, artificial decreases caused by different external factors, and then you get deficits that happen. And here we've had a deficit now for 3 out of the past 4 years of new listings. We finally don't anymore. 2022, our peak at least didn't, even though our bottoms did. But I would go ahead and include 2022 in there because even though the peak was up there, the rest of the year was quite low in comparison to other years. So we've had basically 4 years of new listings being shorter than what they should be. We're caught up now in terms of 2025, but we're not caught up in terms of the previous 4 years. Pending sales. I always have to warn you guys that pending sales always gets revised in a big way. Trump wouldn't like that, right? That's the whole reason why he fired the person that was over the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and I get that. It's annoying to me to have these big revisions. I don't like them, but I'd rather have the revised accurate data than the unrevised incorrect data. So June got revised up from what it was. It was 871. It had a huge revision up to 1463 pending sales. This is the count of properties on which offers have been accepted in a given month. So it was revised up by 600. Now that was still, or almost 600 units. That's still a negative year-on-year number because June of 2025 was 1511. So we actually, pending sales for the month of June went down minus 3.2%. That's our first negative print year-on-year in quite some time. July, on the other hand, is probably going to bounce back. Currently, it says 901 pending sales, but if we have a revision of roughly 600 more units added, that would take us to around 1,500, which I do believe is what will end up maybe in the high to mid 1400s. And July of last year was 1445. So we're going to see pending sales most likely for the month of July. Once that gets revised, it's going to be a slight increase year on year. But how does it compare to the 2013 to 2019 period of time? And this is one of the areas where we can feel like it's more of a buyer's market than a seller's market. It's that pending sales have not kept up. And here's what happened. We had a slight jump in 2020, ever so slightly, where 2020 and 2021 were just a tad bit higher than what we would expect. Now, the lows of those years, the low months of those years were really high. So we have to account for that as well. But that had the reverse effect of what we just talked about. We just talked about how there has been a deficit in supply. Well, there was a surplus in demand during these years. And so now, in more recent years, some of that demand just isn't there. Some of that demand, obviously, is gone because of the lock-in effect that we've talked about with mortgage rates. There's all sorts of reasons. But you can see here, if you're looking at the line, we are trending way, way below where we should be. We should be, right now, sitting just beneath 2,000 pending sales for this month. Where are we at? We're at, I'm estimating, for July, around 1,500. That is a huge, huge difference. This is why the market feels slow if you're a seller. This is why, and we've been going on multiple years of this, which you can see 2022, 23, and 24, and now 25 have all been trending below the 2013 to 2019 pace. Closed sales, not surprisingly, closed sales loosely follows pending sales, right? You have to, a listing has to go pending before it closes. And so we had closed sales in July, an increase yet again. We've had increases all year long so far, year on year, 3.2% increase from July of 2024, which was 1578. It went up to 1629 July of 25. So that's a small increase in comparison to what we've had most of the year, but still an increase year on year. So more closings than last year, but how does that compare historically? It is still way, way, way low, okay? And again, if you're looking at the chart, you can see similarly, we actually really kept up with what we should have been, honestly, through even 2022. The closings have, and the closed sales have only really taken a really negative turn since 2023. And of course, there has been, since 2023, new construction has dominated. Some of the new construction data doesn't flow into the multiple listing service. And so what we're seeing here, in my personal opinion, is a gap that new construction has filled, and that is crushing people that are trying to sell their home that they currently live in, the resales, okay? The existing home sale market. So we should be well over 2,000 closed units per month. Instead, we're at 1629 and have not even come close to 2,000. May this year was the highest number we'd ever have, which was 1779. And that didn't come close to 2,000. Let me tell you that. We should have been over 2,000 for pretty much the majority of the year so far, based on trends going back to 2013. Days on market until sale. This is not one we're going to go back to 2013 trends for, because it was trending down, but eventually you have to reach a point where you don't go lower than a certain number. And for a healthy market, or lower or higher, for a healthy market, we should be seeing days on market, trending between 40 and 70 days is a normal healthy market by Greenville standards. And that's where we're at right now. We're at July, 48 days on market until sale. That's a normal healthy number. Now that is up from 40 days of last July. That's a substantial amount. That's a 20% increase, which is the largest increase that we've had since October of 2024 in terms of year on year. So that's noteworthy. It's taken a lot longer as of July for homes to sell than what it was last summer. So that's very, very noteworthy. But historically, going back to 2013, it's not really that noteworthy. Now, why it feels noteworthy is because people got so used to homes selling quicker that now 48 days feels like an absolute eternity. But it's really not, historically speaking. Median sales price, this is another one of the ones that just pops off the page to me, okay? The median sales price, we hit a new high for Greenville, $331,644. That's a 2%, a healthy 2% increase. I say healthy because we need really, I think the way the market is right now, we don't need to see appreciation much higher than 2 to 3%. And again, this doesn't even track appreciation directly, but it's the best metric that we have for it, is to see what's the median sales price every year. It tells us the trajectory of the market. It doesn't inherently tell us the level of appreciation. So you can't just go to your house and be like, okay, well, it's gone up in value 2% the past year. No. It doesn't work that way. Hear what I'm saying. The market as a whole has gotten 2% more expensive the past year. Some of that's appreciation. Some of that is other factors. But 331,644 is now the median sales price, which is basically, it's not the average, but it basically, if you want to think of the average, this one is really more accurate in terms of what prices are right now in Greater Greenville than the average are, because the average is skewed by all these $2, $3, $4, $5 million homes that are being sold. Okay, hope that makes sense. How does this compare to 2013 though? Way above. Okay, according to my little line that I drew, our prices in the Greater Greenville area should be roughly about 290,000 should be the median, instead of 331. And we have outpaced this line dramatically since basically the beginning of, or the middle, depending on how you look at it, of 2021. We saw huge spike in appreciation. And even though we have kind of bounced around here, the trend line is continuing slower, but still upward. Okay. What is causing this, right? What's causing this is that there is still enough demand for us to see that gradual appreciation, right? There's still enough demand in the Greater Greenville area to see prices, again, gradually increase. Here's the thing that most people don't realize. This mass increase that happened, I mean, really starting in 2020 and continuing until basically the middle of 2022, that huge increase when the median sales price went from roughly 200,000 to almost 300,000 in just a couple of years. That, as crazy and insane as that was, Greenville did not experience the level of appreciation that so many other markets did. It didn't. And same thing for Spartanburg, same thing for Anderson. The Greater Greenville area did not experience the level of price increases that many other markets did. Trust me, I followed it. This looks like a bubble, okay? Because we suddenly had this huge jump. But you know what we also had around this time? We also had a ton of people with a ton of money move to this area. And they brought with them all that money, all that disposable income. We've got a lot of retirees in the state and in this area. Guess what? Retirees are some of the biggest purchasers of real estate right now. More retirees are purchasing real estate right now than first-time home buyers. Okay? Greenville is really well poised for all of this. And so what happened was, when all these other markets were seeing this extreme appreciation, Greenville did not get it all at once. But now that things have corrected, those other markets that saw that extreme appreciation, a lot of them are starting to see extreme depreciation now. There's a lot of depreciating markets around the country, particularly in the Southeast, by the way. People don't realize this. Florida's getting, some of the home prices in Florida getting destroyed. And so, long story short, Greenville is still seeing price increases because it's just a more stable market than some of these others. The highs aren't as high as others. The lows aren't as low as others. We didn't see the craziness of the pandemic that others saw, and now we're not seeing the massive correction that some of these other markets are seeing. We're seeing stability because people didn't go crazy before. I know some people are going to hear this and be like, they weren't going crazy before. That market was crazy. Yeah, it was crazy in many, many ways. But trust me when I say this, there were some markets that were getting 30 to 40% appreciation per year. Greenville didn't have anything close to that. And so now that we're out of it, there is still room to grow. Now, how do you explain this gap? the way I would explain this gap is and if you're listening, the gap I'm talking about is the gap between the line, which says that we should be at about $280,000 per sale, and the actual dot plot that says we're at $331,000. I think that the explanation for that does come back to what we talked about with the new listings data. There aren't enough houses on the market to still, even with inventory where it's at, and we'll be talking about inventory here in a second. Even with inventory, sorry for all the scrolling if you're looking on YouTube here. Even as inventory has gone way up, the reality is that there still has not been enough, particularly of existing homes, right? So much of the inventory story is a new construction story. Most people don't want new construction for a variety of reasons. Most people want to buy a home that's already been built, and that has character and that's on a larger lot, and maybe that's not in an HOA. All these different things, and so what we have, I believe, is we have prices going up still because inventory is we still have that deficit from those prior years. Now, at some point, we would catch up, and then we would see maybe prices start to go down. But at the moment, we're not there. Average sales price is a similar story. Again, we're way ahead of where it appears that we should be. We should be like maybe 325 average sales price. Instead, we're at 401 and change, which is a 1% increase year on year. Again, I think 331 is more accurate to say to people that that's our average versus the average itself. But if you care, the average itself is 401. It's now the third straight month of our average being above 400. We've never had that before. So that's interesting. Percent of list price received stayed constant at 98.5%. Same thing as it was last year. That's the first flat reading we've had all year so far in 2025. This one I didn't do the line on because this is another one that in a healthy market we typically see 97 to maybe even as low as 96%, but not somewhere between 96 and 99% of list price received. 96% is going to be more in a buyer-friendly market, 99% more in a seller-friendly market. But once you go below 96, that's like recession level. Once you go above 99, that's like insano seller's market level. So we like to see between 96 and 99%. We're at 98.5. That's great. That's comfortable. That's what it was pre-pandemic. Let's keep that going. Housing Affordability Index is at 92. That is a 1.1% decrease from 93 the year before. We have had a little bit of easing on mortgage rates since July, so this might go up a little bit, but as long as that median sales price, as long as mortgage rates stay the same and the median sales price keeps going up, this number is going to keep going down. Now, here's what's interesting is that if we look at this from 2013, it's actually exactly where you would expect it to be based on what the data was in 2013. Now, you could maybe argue that I didn't do this line the way I should have, and maybe the line actually should be a lot higher. It depends on how you do it. But the reality is that it was going down quite a bit for quite some time. Maybe this is, I'm tinkering with it a little bit. This is probably a little bit better. So we are below, where we should be. But basically, the trajectory we were going in since 2013, depending on how you look at it, we would be right around 100 as a housing affordability index. So we're below where it's expected that we would be based on the trend from 2013. But the reality is that since 2013, housing has gotten more and more and more expensive, and that's caused this housing affordability index to go lower than it should be. We like the number to be at 100 or higher. That tells us it's an affordable market for the average family, or at least the average family can afford roughly the average priced home. Swap out average with median, you get the right idea. But that's where we're at. Depending on how you look at it, we should be either right around 100. Or if you feel like I wasn't honest with that, the other way to look at it is that we should be at about 120, 125. And that would be the other way of looking at it now. If we were at that 125 level, we would be feeling great. I mean, there would be homes flying left off the shelves left and right. But again, the reality is that we had all these months where housing went super affordable in 2020 and 2021 because of mortgage rates, because the Housing Affordability Index takes mortgage rates into account. So we had all of that affordability, and that basically robbed us of affordability in the future. Inventory of homes. This is one that frequently gets revised. So the month of June got revised down from 6,226 down to 5,593. That's still a 28.4% increase year on year. So, like I said before, even though we've got numbers show that inventory, we probably need more inventory. It's not that we're lacking inventory. We have quite a bit of inventory in comparison to the historical norms. Now, July, this number is going to be revised pretty heavily, right? Because I just said that the June number got revised by 600 and change. So the July number will get revised as well down to probably 5,800 or something like that. Currently, it's 6,444. 5,800 is still going to be the largest number that we have had in years. We've not crested 6,000 homes on the market since 2011, okay? And we are knocking at the door right now. In July of last year, we had 4,432 homes on the market. That is an insane increase to go from that to roughly what I'm predicting is going to be 58-ish hundred. Insane. So we've now seen since March, basically 5 straight months of inventory going up over 20% year on year. That is a lot of inventory right now. And this is one of the things you're competing against if you're a seller. All of these other sellers. Month supply of inventory. This one usually gets revised pretty heavily down. Last month, or last time we had these stats, we were told that June was 4.6 months of inventory. That got revised down to 4.0. Now we're being told July is 4.7, so that's probably closer to 4.1, 4.2. Either way, that's a big increase from the 3.3 months of supply that we saw a year ago. So month supply of inventory is going up. That's good in a way. Although I've been telling you guys, if we start to get into the mid to high 4s on month supply of inventory, it's going to feel like a buyer's market. Beware, the number keeps going up. Okay, now we're starting to get into the low 4s. First time in over 5 years that we have seen numbers like this. Okay, so brace yourselves. I'm not saying that home prices are going to crash. I'm not saying that we're having anything crazy like that. I'm just saying we need to track this because this tells us, this one number tells us a lot of what's happening in the market. This tells us how quickly homes are being absorbed, right? And historically, 6 months is when the market turns from a seller's market to a buyer's market. But that's not the case anymore because of all of the new construction that is skewing so much of this data. Because a lot of the new construction is in the multiple listing service. And there's just a lot that happens outside of the MLS. There's a lot more inventory. What I'm saying is there's a lot of shadow inventory. Okay, there's a lot of inventory that's not showing up in this data. And people need to be aware of that. That's why it feels more like a buyer's market, and it may technically be a buyer's market. You know, if we didn't have the shadow inventory effect and all of that, we might be able to say definitively, okay, this is a buyer's market. But right now, it's not so much a buyer's market that we're seeing prices market-wide go down, but we are seeing it in specific areas. We're seeing a lot of interesting things. So I hope that this was helpful for you guys. Put all this data in perspective, not just for the past year, but for the past 12 years. And please let me know if you have any questions on any of it. Comment on YouTube, like, subscribe, leave a rating, leave a review if you're using another podcast platform. And please remember that my contact information is in the show notes. If you need a realtor in the Greenville area that understands what's happening, guess what? This data informs how I coach my clients. I use this data in everyday life. My clients have questions. Well, what if I wait 3 months? Or what if I wait a year? What I don't know. I can't predict the future, but I can tell you what's happened in the past, and the past usually reflects the future. So please reach out if you have any real estate related questions. I'm happy to help you out. Thank you guys so much for listening or watching. We will talk again next time.